what if the reason you're burning out at work isn't because you lack discipline or, because you aren't trying hard enough?
Right.
What if the real reason is that your DNA is actively rejecting the environment you've put yourself in?
It is a radical way to look at a career, for sure. But the data we have, it's telling us that we've been looking at human potential entirely backwards.
Yeah.
We treat our personalities like clay that can just be molded into whatever job description pays the best, when really the reality is far more biological.
And that biological reality is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
But before we really get into it, I want to give you a fair warning. Consider this an upfront heads up. We are going to go incredibly deep today.
We have to.
We really do. We are looking at the absolute bleeding edge of behavioral research, which means we have to dive into some fairly arcane science. We're talking genetics, statistical taxonomy, complex biological architecture.
So the heavy stuff.
Exactly. But stick with us, because the payoff here is massively practical. This is entirely about your self-awareness, your self-development, and honestly, how the world's most elite organizations select their top talent.
Yeah, we have to wade through the complex mechanisms of the science just to understand the incredible leverage it actually gives you in the real world.
So I really want to speak directly to you, the listener, right now. Specifically, if you are a young professional, let's say you're in that crucial 18 to 28 age bracket.
Right, the early career stage.
Yeah, and you are actively seeking an elite career development path. If you are ambitious and your ultimate aim is sitting in the C-suite, this deep dive is custom tailored for you.
Absolutely.
We're going to help you uncover the invisible architecture of your own potential. But to understand why this is so critical right now, we have to look at the macro environment first. Why are companies suddenly so obsessed with behavioral science?
Well, it's because the traditional corporate safety nets are, they're disintegrating.
Yeah.
And it's largely driven by the disruption of generative AI. We aren't theorizing about some sci-fi future anymore. This is a present economic reality. The sources indicate that AI could impact up to, get this, 300 million full-time jobs globally within this decade.
Wait, 300 million?
300 million. By automating up to 50% of the tasks within those roles.
That is, wow. So the technical skills, the coding languages, the data processing, all the things you used to put in bold at the very top of your resume, those are becoming automated commodities.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because if a machine can write the code or, generate the financial model in 3 seconds, your ability to do it in 3 hours is no longer a unique value proposition.
Right.
So because technical expertise is becoming less uniquely valuable, the market is aggressively shifting its focus. Intrinsic behavioral strengths are becoming the defining career assets for the 2030s.
Things like adaptability, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Deep adaptability, complex emotional intelligence, resilience under volatility, and just raw leadership capacity.
But you can't exactly just, send someone to a weekend seminar to learn raw leadership capacity.
You really can't.
And that seems to be the core crisis, right? The sources show that 77% of U.S. organizations currently report a shallow leadership bench.
It is a massive void.
Yeah.
They simply do not have the people equipped to lead through this level of disruption. And the financial toll of that void is staggering. Global economic forecasts predict that these leadership gaps are going to cost the global economy $8.5 trillion by 2030.
8.5 trillion.
Trillion, yeah.
So elite companies are just desperate. But the way they've historically tried to fill this void is, it's basically just corporate gambling.
It really is.
You look at a resume, which is entirely subjective. You do a behavioral interview where everyone is on their absolute best behavior for, 45 minutes, and then you just roll the dice.
Yep.
It's the classic Peter principle. You take your best software engineer, you promote them to engineering manager because they're great at writing code, and you just blindly cross your fingers that their technical skills will somehow organically translate into leadership behavior.
And surprise, surprise, it almost never does. The failure rates for new executives are incredibly high, mostly because the corporate world has relied on this subjective alchemy rather than actual science.
Alchemy, I like that.
Well, it is. But to solve the $8.5 trillion problem, organizations are abandoning these legacy models, and they're turning to something called Personality Analytics 4.0.
Okay, Personality Analytics 4.0. Let's dig into this. This is the scientific engine that powers the Rutherford and Tell assessment. But before we get into what 4.0 actually does, we need to understand why the older assessments are failing so badly.
Right.
The ones you, the listener, have probably taken in college or at some corporate retreat. I'm talking about the Myers-Briggs or the mainstream Big Five models. Why don't those work anymore?
They fail because they are fundamentally superficial. Tests like the MBTI typically evaluate between, I think, 26 and 50 very broad traits, and they hover around a mere 55% accuracy rate when it comes to predicting actual on-the-job role performance.
Only 55%. That's barely better than a coin flip.
Exactly.
In the scientific community, they're viewed more as descriptive parlor games or, corporate icebreakers than rigorous diagnostic tools.
Yeah, the sources actually had a great analogy for this. They pointed out that using a legacy personality test to make a high-stakes decision, like who to hire for a C-suite role or what career you should dedicate a decade of your life to, is like using your Monopoly skill to mortgage your real-world house.
That's a perfect way to frame it.
It places you in this static, simple little box, but it completely ignores the complex physics of human behavior.
Yeah.
So how exactly does 4.0 move us from that alchemy to an actual periodic table of behavior?
Well, 4.0 operates on an entirely different plane. It utilizes really rigorous, high-dimensional statistical taxonomy to evaluate 83 distinct, statistically independent behavioral traits.
Okay.
And because it doesn't rely on human interpretation, there is zero human bias. It correlates an individual's unique behavioral blueprint with objective, on-the-job performance metrics across 1,500 to over 1,750 distinct professional roles.
Wow. And the predictive accuracy rate on this is, what, 85%? Yes, 85% predictive accuracy for role performance.
Okay, I have to push back here. 85% accuracy in predicting human behavior. That sounds like science fiction. I mean, humans are messy, irrational creatures.
Yeah.
What if I take this assessment on a Tuesday after I just got dumped, I barely slept, and I drank like 4 shots of espresso? How does an algorithm filter out a terribly bad day to hit an 85% accuracy rate?
And that right there is the core difference between legacy tests and 4.0.
Yeah.
It doesn't measure your temporary emotional state. A legacy test might ask, do you feel energized at large gatherings?
Right.
Your answer to that changes entirely based on how much sleep you got or if you just went through a breakup. Personality Analytics 4.0, on the other hand, measures underlying cognitive processing.
Interesting.
How you evaluate risk, how you sequence logic, how you prioritize conflicting information. 4 espressos might make you talk faster, but they do not change the foundational neurological way your brain categorizes data.
Because it's biological. And this is where we hit that arcane science we warned you guys about. The sources get really deep into how these 83 traits aren't just habits you picked up in childhood.
No, not at all. They are deeply rooted inherited architectures. The research is anchored in quantitative trait loci, or QTL mapping, and genome-wide association studies, GWAS.
Okay, alphabet soup.
Yeah, a bit. But this scientific paradigm recognizes that personality is a polygenic trait. It isn't just one single gene turning something on or off. It's the cumulative interaction of multiple genetic variables that dictate your overarching behavior.
Whoa, stop right there. Polygenic traits and genome-wide association studies. Explain the mechanics of this to me like I don't have a PhD in genetics.
Fair enough?
How does my DNA actually dictate if I'm going to be a good executive?
Think of it like a massive audio mixing board in a recording studio. You have 10,000 different sliders. No single slider makes a rock song. But if you push up 50 very specific sliders, genes, related to, say, dopamine processing, cortisol regulation, spatial pattern recognition, and you pull down 50 other sliders, the cumulative interaction creates a very distinct audio profile.
Ah, I see.
In human terms, that profile might be a visionary risk-taker who thrives in chaos. Your environment and your childhood might teach you how to, polish the song, but the genetic mixing board was set at birth.
That mixing board metaphor is fascinating, and the statistical proof for this from the sources is wild. They mention researchers looking at completely unrelated individuals who benchmarked highly for specific behavioral profiles. What were the odds they found again?
Oh, this is mind-bending. They calculated the odds of 10 unrelated, highly performing individuals sharing identical genetic variants across just 7 specific behavioral genes. The probability was approximately 1.0 times 10 to the negative 28th power.
Let me just emphasize that number for you listening. 1.0 times 10 to the negative 28th. That is a decimal point followed by 27 zeros and a 1.
It's statistically impossible to be chance.
It is a mathematical near impossibility for it to be a coincidence. It confirms that these behavioral architectures, whether you are a highly analytical process driver or a highly adaptable opportunist, they are pre-programmed.
Exactly. And it completely changes the conversation from how do we train this person to be a leader to does this person possess the biological architecture required to lead in this specific environment?
Which logically brings us to the next massive question. If this architecture is hardwired from birth, why on earth do companies wait until an employee is 45 or 50 years old to give them these elite assessments?
Right.
If I'm 22 years old listening to this right now, how do I get access to this?
Historically, you didn't. But this is the exact paradigm shift driving the Rising Young Stars program. It's a newly proposed service from Rutherford International, designed specifically to identify and cultivate top-tier leadership talent in young adults between 18 and 28.
So it's catching them early.
Very early. The core thesis is simple. The behavioral architecture for executive success is already fully present in you at age 18, long before you have the fancy degrees, the decade of experience, or the official job titles.
I really like how the sources frame this initiative. They call it a SMORS agent model.
Yes.
Instead of you writing a cover letter, tossing your resume into a black hole on a passive job board, and just praying some algorithm flags your application, this program actively represents you. They act as your agent. They systematically develop and discreetly promote your scientifically verified high-performing profile directly to elite global organizations.
It's proactive representation. But, it's gated by rigorous science.
Yeah.
When you take the Rutherford Intel assessment to qualify, the algorithm evaluates you across what they call the five-dimensional model of leadership. It doesn't just lump you into a vague CEO material bucket. Yeah. It maps your specific mechanics.
Right. Let's actually look at how it measures those mechanics. Dimension 1 is leadership personality types. That's mapping those 83 traits against profiles naturally wired for the C-suite, like the opportunist who embraces risk, or the result-driven type who is highly decisive.
Right. And Dimension 2 is leadership styles, matching your natural inclination, whether autocratic or democratic, to what a specific role actually demands.
Yeah, and Dimension 3 is arguably the most critical one for a young professional. It's called the ladder of leadership. This pinpoints where you naturally sit on the organizational spectrum, frontline, mid-level, or top level. Crucially, it tests your potential to excel up to 2 levels above your current position. It identifies your leadership headroom.
Exactly, your headroom.
See, this is where I need to know the how. If you are 23 years old and your current job is managing a spreadsheet or fetching coffee as a junior analyst, how does an algorithm possibly measure your headroom to be a vice president? You have zero management experience to draw from.
Because it doesn't care about your past experience. It cares about your cognitive load management and your structural thinking.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Well, a frontline worker's brain naturally focuses tactically. How do I execute this specific task efficiently? But an executive's brain naturally focuses structurally. Why are we executing this task? How does it interact with these 3 other departments? And what are the cascading risks 6 months from now?
Oh, I see the difference.
The assessment measures your comfort with ambiguity, your capacity for abstract strategic foresight, and how you process conflicting data. It detects that executive cognitive processing even if you've never supervised a single employee.
That makes perfect sense. It's looking for the engine, not the paint job.
Perfect analogy.
And Dimension 4 covers universal responsibilities, transcendent traits like setting performance standards. Then Dimension 5 is pillars of leadership, measuring emotional intelligence and team integration. It basically shows if you can actually shift from being a brilliant solo contributor to a leader who elevates others.
Exactly. It's a comprehensive diagnostic of your biological readiness to lead.
Okay, but let's address the elephant in the room here.
Right.
This sounds incredibly exclusive. It is a strictly meritocratic, science-gated program.
It is.
You take the Rutherford Intel assessment, and you only get invited into the Rising Young Stars program if you benchmark in the top tier for C-suite potential. So what happens to the young professional who pays the entry fee, takes the test, and the algorithm says they fall below the benchmark?
It's a fair question.
Does a computer just sentence them to middle management for the rest of their life? Because that feels genuinely dystopian to me.
It would be dystopian if it were a binary pass-or-fail system. But the program operates on a core philosophy called the honest redirect. Because the assessment maps your 83 traits against different 1,750 different professional roles, it doesn't just reject you. It takes your exact behavioral blueprint and maps your natural talents to alternative high-performing roles.
So it tells you where your mixing board actually sounds best.
Precisely. Maybe you don't possess the specific genetic markers for C-suite volatility. Putting you in that path would guarantee massive imposter syndrome and inevitable burnout.
Right. Nobody wants that.
Exactly. The honest redirect might show that your blueprint perfectly matches a highly compensated, specialized analytical role where you will operate in a constant state of flow. It prevents you from spending a decade aggressively climbing the wrong ladder.
That is actually incredibly empowering. It removes all that friction of trying to be someone you aren't. But let's look at the flip side. Let's say you take the assessment and you get the golden ticket, you benchmark highly. You are officially in the Rising Young Stars program. What does the actual development infrastructure look like?
Once qualified, the development is intensive. You receive a personalized 3-year development roadmap, custom coaching, and professional mentorship from senior executives.
Wow.
But the absolute core of the acceleration happens through placement in what they call a mastermind circle. Mastermind circles. Now, we need to clarify this because it sounds like one of those corporate networking retreats where everyone exchanges business cards, does a trust fall, and goes home completely unchanged.
It is the exact opposite of that, I promise you. These are highly curated, strictly confidential cohorts of exactly 7 people. You're grouped with ambitious, non-competing peers in your age bracket. And the key mechanism here is that you are algorithmically matched by your aspiration and your specific personality analytics 4.0 type.
Oh, wow. So if you are a highly logical, detail-oriented, analytic type,
Right.
you are sitting in a virtual room with 6 other people who process complex information exactly the way you do.
Correct. And this is how it accelerates real-world leadership growth. Instead of sitting through theoretical lectures, you're placed in an environment where you are solving real-world, cross-sector business challenges together.
It's like training in a wind tunnel. You are testing your leadership aerodynamics in a highly controlled, high-pressure environment alongside peers who share your exact psychological physics.
If you bring a supply chain crisis to the group, you don't have to spend 3 hours explaining your logical framework because everyone else at the table natively speaks your cognitive language. The speed of iteration and problem solving must be just staggering.
It really is. It embeds your 3-year development roadmap through immediate, practical exposure. You are gaining a decade of executive problem-solving intuition in just a fraction of the time.
Okay, so it's obvious why this is a massive advantage for the 22-year-old listener. But elite organizations are not charities. Why are global corporations so eager to trust their billion-dollar succession pipelines to this program?
It all comes down to risk mitigation in high-stakes sectors. Remember that 85% predictive accuracy we talked about?
Yeah.
Elite organizations are willing to pay a premium for that certainty because the cost of hiring the wrong candidate is astronomical. Let's look at the commercial real estate sector, or CRE, as an example.
The attrition numbers and the sources for real estate were wild. Walk us through that.
A typical Gateway City CRE brokerage trainee costs an organization approximately $142,500 annually.
Ouch.
Yeah, and yet, the industry suffers a massive 50% attrition rate in year 1 alone. The reason is biological. Fewer than 25% of candidates actually possess the natural, inherited power broker traits required to sustain success in that specific, high-pressure environment.
So they're just guessing.
Mostly, yes. The Rising Young Stars program identifies those rare traits before the firm burns $142,500 on a candidate who is biologically wired to hate the job.
They stop throwing money at the 75% who are inevitably going to quit anyway. That's huge. But it goes way beyond sales. I was totally fascinated by the application in the nuclear power sector.
Nuclear is perhaps the most vital case study for this science. We are entering a global nuclear renaissance, and they are facing a severe talent shortage. The hardest positions to fill roles like commissioning director or nuclear quality assurance director are estimated to be 80% behavior and only 20% trainable skill.
Wait, 80% behavior for a nuclear facility. Why can't you just aggressively train a brilliant engineer to do that job?
Because under extreme, catastrophic pressure, your training degrades and you revert to your biological baseline.
Yeah.
You can teach the engineering manual, but you cannot teach the temperament required to handle nuclear-grade pressure without panicking.
Ah.
The industry desperately needs candidates with a very specific, rare hybrid of traits.
Yeah.
They must be rigorously process-driven, deeply responsible, and highly analytic.
Right, because if your baseline genetic trait is a flexible opportunist who likes to improvise, and you improvise when a reactor goes offline, you have a global safety disaster. You need someone who is biologically wired to methodically adhere to the process without needing consensus.
Exactly. The program builds a pre-assessed bench of these highly specific, rare hybrid profiles. So the nuclear industry isn't guessing when they hire for critical safety roles.
Yeah.
You see the exact same logic applied to private equity and mega construction.
Right, because in private equity, if you install the wrong CEO in a portfolio company, it can decimate the life cycle returns of a multi-billion-dollar fund.
Assessing an executive's behavioral architecture before deploying capital is the ultimate form of risk insulation. And in mega construction, think of the $2.5 billion hyperscaler data centers being built for companies like Amazon or Meta. The pressure is so intense that only 8 to 13 people out of every 1,000 actually benchmark for sustained high performance under that specific level of volatility. Let me do the math on that. 8 to 13 per thousand. That is roughly 1% of the talent pool. It is incredibly rare. The Rising Young Stars program provides absolute behavioral certainty to these industries. It de-risks their succession architecture by identifying those 8 to 13 people when they are 22 years old instead of trying to hunt them down when they're 50.
Okay, so that brings up a critical final logistical question. Let's say you get in at 24. What happens when you aren't in your 20s anymore? When this 18 to 28 age window closes, do you just age out of the program and they say, thanks for playing, good luck out there on your own?
Not at all. The Rising Young Stars program is merely the entry point. It is designed to initiate a 40-year, lifelong professional relationship within the broader Rutherford ecosystem. You don't age out, you graduate.
And where exactly do you graduate to?
You transition into the Talent Guild. This is an active, elite marketplace where your verified incognito profile is promoted to over 730,000 professional and corporate subscribers globally.
That's massive exposure.
Exactly. As your career matures, you gain access to advanced career planning intelligence reports. And looking toward the near future, participants will eventually interact with something called Mirror Buddy, which is a highly personalized, behavior-aligned AI coaching companion slated to launch in 2027.
An AI coach that actually understands the specific polygenic mixing board of your brain. So it doesn't just give you generic motivational quotes. It gives you advice tailored to your exact 83-trait blueprint.
It will use your 5-dimensional assessment data as a living dynamic tool to guide your daily career decisions, conflict resolutions, and leadership challenges. It is truly a cradle-to-legacy support system.
This has been an incredibly dense journey through the mechanics of who we are, but I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over.
Yeah, what's that?
Well, we spend our entire lives twisting ourselves into knots. We try to be the extroverted salesperson, the hyper-organized manager, or the visionary disruptor because society tells us that's what success looks like. But what if our entire societal concept of potential has been backwards this whole time?
The data strongly suggests that potential isn't about how much you can change yourself through sheer willpower.
Exactly. What if the ultimate secret to elite success isn't changing your foundation at all? You don't need to rip up the concrete of your DNA. You just need to discover the precise environment, the exact professional house that was already biologically meant to be built on top of it.
Beautifully said.
When you align your daily career with your genetic behavioral architecture, work stops being this constant draining friction, and it becomes a state of effortless flow.
And that, honestly, is the ultimate competitive advantage.
The sources leave us with this challenge. Stop waiting to discover what you were built for by accident when you're 35 years old. Don't spend the next decade relying on the muddy waters of trial and error. The science is here. Discover your inherent nature and your true potential today by taking the Rutherford Intel assessment.
Find out what your biological blueprint actually says.
Yeah, see if you possess the hidden architecture of a rising young star.
You really no longer have to build your career blind.
We started this deep dive talking about X-rays. For the first time, you have the diagnostic technology to see the invisible genetic structure of your own capabilities. Go get the scan.